So as you all know, we just had Valentine's Day, which is a fun time for a lot of people. There's lots of chocolate and big teddy bears and stuff like that. But it can also be a really difficult time for a lot of people. And we usually think about single people, which of course it's very difficult for people who are single to go through Valentine's Day. But also something that I think we need to talk about, we need to get real about, is that sometimes Valentine's Day can be really hard even if you have a spouse or significant
other.
Right.
Because I think that a lot of times that day has so many expectations, it can absolutely be a dumpster fire for certain people who are lacking intimacy or have some different issues that are kind of ongoing.
So one of the things is that, let's say your husband decides, hey, I'm going to do what I think I'm supposed to do, and you're going to go
get chocolates, flowers, like all the stereotypical stuff that you think you're supposed to do.
Right. And so you plop them down on the counter at the beginning of the day for your wife, and you probably expect like high praise, big pat on the back. You probably
like,
spent $60. Like that was a big thing.
Sure.
And not to say that your intention wasn't bad. Like your intention was that you were doing what you thought you should do and you were trying to show love. But how many times do we know of clients or people or even ourselves at different times have received something like that on Valentine's Day, and instead of being super excited about it, we become resentful.
Because it just misses the mark for one reason or another.
Right. And then as the guy, you're probably like really confused, right?
Right. Not receiving higher praise or
right. You thought you
might
did.
Be, that you were expecting to get back.
Right. And the problem is that that's where intimacy is really important, because maybe what that person wanted was a night out with her spouse, away from the kids, away from work, and actually having like 30, 45 minutes to just have you sit there and connect and actually listen, not with a cell phone, but actually listen and pay attention so that she feels heard. Like maybe that was what she was really looking forward to on Valentine's Day. So when it became something that was just presented on the kitchen island as like, flowers or whatever, it's beautiful. But
like, here's your appreciation.
Right. But that missed the mark, because that's not what she was looking for. And that kind of highlights that there are deeper issues of intimacy going on in that relationship, because we tend to think about intimacy as being physical, which it is, but that's only one part of it.
Right.
Intimacy the definition is to know deeply something. So it's a closeness. And unfortunately, plenty of couples don't have a true closeness. There isn't true intimacy, that really knowing through and through the other person, to read the pulse, if you will, of the relationship and what that person is dealing with day to day.
Well, and I think that a lot of that boils down to, we were talking about the expectations that different people have for Valentine's, whether it's chocolates or flowers or whatever. But I think really what goes beyond just kind of doing what you feel like you're expected to do and building intimacy is really being intentional and actually having a conversation, as silly as it sounds, maybe actually just going to your spouse and being like, hey, what does Valentine's Day look like for you? What's a good Valentine's Day look like for you? Maybe, if you've got financial things going on, maybe a good Valentine's looks like staying at home, whereas one partner is like wanting to go out and, have a great restaurant experience or something like that. And that just is, you got to be balanced. You got to be on the same page. And the only way to really get there is through communication, through intentional questions, and sometimes just covering like the very simple bases by asking the other person what they want or what their expectation is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where intimacy is so important. So in order to build intimacy with someone, you have to get to know them. And I don't care if you've been married for 10, 20 years. If we are healthy individuals, we look different from month to month, year to year. We're growing, we're changing,
Right.
we're having new experiences. So you may think you know your partner, but maybe you don't, because maybe it's been a long time that you've actually sat down and spent quality time just really understanding where that person is right now and feeling the pulse of what's going on for them personally.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I've had different clients. I've had a range of people, a range of ages. And I have two clients that I'm thinking of right now, and they were both married for like 40, 50 years, something like that, a really long time. And one of the clients I was talking to, and I was like, oh yeah, like, share some of your wisdom, like what's been going well. And he was like, well, I definitely did some things well because we've been married for a long time, yada, yada, yada. And that was kind of nice. And the other client I was talking to, and he was just like, oh no, like I know what you think, like we've been married for a long time, but like she just lives in my house with me. Mm-hmm. So I think that, sometimes we can have the expectation that somebody's been married a long time, they have this great relationship that's just thriving, and they figured everything out, but that's not necessarily the case. So whether you've been married for a short period of time or whether you've been married for a really long period of time, there's always things that you can do, things that you can ask, little things that can build your relationship and make it better.
Yeah, right. And that makes your lives better, right? Because if your marriage is at a really good place, you spend probably the most amount of time with your spouse, with your family. So if those relationships are out of whack, it's going to throw off the equilibrium of everything that's going on. So this benefits not just you, but everyone in your ecosystem, really. So I think, it's like, well, okay, how do we make that happen? And I think both people have to be clearly on board to be willing to invest in their marriage and be intentional about it, to get to know each other, to talk, to ask questions like, how are you really doing? And really listen. That's the really difficult part sometimes. So now we'd like to make this really applicable for your real life. Like, what do you do in your real life with this? How do you increase your intimacy? So I'm going to ask Clay, as a man, what are some tips that you can give a man on increasing their intimacy with their spouse or their partner? Because sometimes, stereotypically anyway, it's a little bit harder sometimes for men.
So a lot of times I kind of start a series of questions and I start boiling down to like, what is the issue? And so many times I hear guys get to the point where they're just like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, how can we solve the problem if you just don't know? So kind of like what we were saying earlier, you have to ask questions. You can't just be in the same room as your spouse. You can't just be around them and just expect that you know what they're thinking. So it's really important to ask questions. Usually that leads to good conversation. Don't ask closed-ended questions.
What does that mean?
So if you and I were at the dinner table and I was just like, how was your day? You would say good or bad. I could say something instead like, so what happened to you today? Like, did you have any big experiences? What went on? So asking an open-ended question is more of allowing you to expand on whatever the subject is. That's going to keep the conversation going. That's going to help me get to know what happened in your day. And obviously, I will quickly figure out, if something bad happened, you're going to be like, oh my gosh. I'm going to be like, okay, she had a bad day.
Right.
So I get the information from the closed-ended question plus a lot of extra color that's going to help me just, feel intimate with you, really know what's going on in your life.
Yeah, and one of the things that we started doing recently, which I kind of like, is asking each other, what do you rate your day? From 0 being terrible to 10 being the best day you've had. Where did your day fall? And I think it's interesting because we work together, even though obviously not every moment are we even working together, but we work in the same vicinity of each other. And so sometimes I would assume that I know kind of what his day has been like just because I can read him somewhat well, but sometimes we surprise each other, I think, and we say, well, my day was actually like a 5 or 4, and that kind of helps to build that intimacy, because then the other person says, well, wait, what? Why was it so low?
Yeah.
And what do we need to do tonight, or do you want to talk about it? And that builds that intimacy, that closeness.
Yeah. And I think also, like, it's easier to connect when you're on the same level. So if my day was a 6 and your day was a 3, then it's a good idea to know that your day was not as good. And if I'm feeling better, I'm more inclined to be like, okay, like, what can I do to help you have a better night? If both our days were like 3s or 2s and we're both feeling crappy, then it's like, all right, forget about making dinner.
Right.
Like, we're going out,
and we've done that.
Let's do something nice because both of us had a bad day.
Right.
And then if both of us are having great days, which I feel like it's kind of rare that we both have really good days. But yeah, then we can just celebrate, and I don't know, maybe we'll go out that night too. It's like we cook on the nights where they're in the middle, but we go out on the good nights and the bad nights.
But that does build the intimacy. And then it's like when I realized that you're at a 4 and I thought maybe you had a 6 kind of a day, then I tend to be able to be more patient, or just be able to understand where you're coming from, and if you need space or time to yourself, it just helps a little bit. And that's like so easy to do, is to just ask someone how your day was from a scale of 0 to 10 and just check in. Like, it doesn't take that long, but it shows that you care and that you are intimately involved with that person.
Yeah.
And it matters.
Yeah. Okay. So tips from today. You want to build intimacy, feel close to your partner by asking open-ended questions.
Open-ended, not just yes or no questions.
Right. And then one thing you can do is have your partner rank their day, and then you rank your day.
Yeah. And have them expand upon it.
Yeah. And then ask why.
Why it was that number. Why it was a 3. Why it was a 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those are
Sounds good.
That's our top for today.
Tips of the day.
Tips of the day about some intimacy. And we'll talk about that more in the future.